I wrote once that there were times when I felt like a motherless child, that great folk song that we sing. And this poem about my mother that I wrote right after I found out about her experience as a young girl. And when I found the picture of her standing somewhat in a picture of her sixth grade class, like all of the school pictures one sees taken during those times. And my mother is standing somewhat off to one side. This is the poem. It's called Ona, which was her name. That's her standing stiffly with others in Rye, Colorado, the year of the great crash. Her cousin Mavis, third girl from the left. My mother looks more poised. Excuse me, I'll start that over because can we go back? Okay. Okay. That's her standing stiffly with the others in Rye, Colorado, the year of the great crash. Her cousin Mavis is there too, third girl from the left. She's more poised than my mother, who stands in a corner, her face like a cameo. By this time, her father was already touching her breasts, which were just beginning to show beneath her cotton midi that she's wearing with a sailor collar. He caught her in the barn where they milked the cows and in the creamery when she made butter. At 14, she was set to live with her Aunt Ada in Cortez, making the trip over Wolf Creek Pass, the darkest day of the year. 2 years later, she married my father, ran away to Monticello to get married, where she was 7 months pregnant with me, her second child. And when she was 7 months pregnant with me, her second child, she drank a bottle of blue poison. Her second husband shot a woman and then cut his own throat with a razor. Her third husband died in a fire a year after he raped her. For a while, she lived with an ex-convict, then married a guy by the name of Burchell O. Eden. Her fifth marriage was to her own daughter's third husband. Not long before she died of heart failure, and he was killed by a car while crossing a street in Delta, the old man was still pressing her. The other boys and girls in the picture are innocent, expectant, dreaming of girlfriends, boyfriends, basketball, and dresses for the school prom. My mother alone casts a shadow on the pastoral backdrop, which has been hung clumsily by the photographer, who cannot see what she knows, and she can never tell anyone, especially her classmates, standing so full of promise before the black, one-eyed box. So when my father sent for my mother to come back to Long Beach, and she said she thought they should be separated, she was pregnant with my younger sister, Janet, my half-sister. And in order to divorce my father and marry Horace, she had to go to get what was called in those days a Mexican divorce. And to get a Mexican divorce and to marry another person, she had to declare she had no children. So that's what my mother did, and had abandoned my brother and me. My father, at the age of 22, decided that he would take care of us. So he asked my Aunt Nona to bring Billy and me to California. He was working in the shipyards and had to leave us with the next door neighbor while he went to work. And when he would come home, he said they hadn't washed any of the diapers. Those are the days when you wash diapers. And so when he got home from work, he would have to cook, wash the diapers, and then leave us the next day again in the care of these people. After a while, he came home one night and found the the apartment vacant and dark, and the people who had been taking care of us had stolen everything that he had and had left us with the next door neighbors. He didn't know what to do. He had no place to stay, but he had a friend who worked for the Long Beach jail. So he took us down and asked that man if he would let us stay in jail. So I was in jail before I was 2. Dad left us in jail for a few days, and I don't know what that was like. I have no memory of it, but I can't imagine it was very pleasant. And then he went to work and came back to the jail, and very soon, after a few days, found a place for us to live. And again, on a very extremely hardscrabble life. My father had a lot of strength of character. He had a hard life. But I think at a time when most men would have abandoned their children or left them to someone else. One of the turning points of my life was having a father who took the responsibility of taking care of 2 little boys under conditions that were extremely difficult. I'm very grateful for that, and there will be other episodes I will speak about. But my father, still trying to find work and having difficulty do so, on various occasions, left my brother Bill and me in the care of other people. One time he left us with some people for 4 months while he went off to Mojave to work in a mine. At other times he left us with other people. So I once figured out, in reading my father's autobiography, which I had recorded before he passed, I recorded in 1982. I recorded his life history. And in going through that account, I realized that Bill and I had been abandoned 10 times by the time I was 10 years old. It's fortunate that I don't have much remembrance of those times, but I do remember some experiences, and I do remember when we were sent back to Colorado, when we went back and were living with our mother, who lived in a tar paper shack in an alley in Cortez, and I remember that it was cold, and I remember we didn't have much to eat. My mother then, I think by that time, my mother and her second husband, Horace, had separated. So my mother was living in this little alley shack with my brother Bill and me and our younger sister Janet, who was then, I suppose, an infant. I remember at some point living with Mom and with Horace. He was kind of a violent man, and I can remember being very frightened of him. I remember one time trying to get away from him and hiding under a bed, and him trying to get me out with a broom. I can remember him just as a person that I was frightened of. As I mentioned later, I don't know what the details, but he was either with another woman and someone found them and killed them both, or he killed her and cut his own throat with a razor. I think it's much less likely that the second scenario happened. But some indication of this. And the fact of the matter is that all of the adults in my life when I was young were alcoholic. My mother and my father began drinking early, and my grandfather Hardin, was an alcoholic. There are a number of alcoholics in my family. And alcoholism had a lot to do with with their lives. I see now that they were self-medicating from the challenges and the difficulty and the poverty. But nevertheless, the drinking caused them to act irresponsibly as parents. My mother never did escape alcoholism and went on to marry other men who were alcoholics and lived in an abusive situation. But as I look back on that time, again, one of the things I have is great compassion for them, because I understand that life was extremely difficult for them. I look at the positive things that came out of that childhood experience.